Welcoming Dr. Adel Elmessiry. What a dear friend you have been. And frankly, if I know anything about technology, I owe it to you.
Well, thank you, Larry, for your sweet introduction, and I'm very sorry for what I've done to you. But my PhD actually is in machine learning, natural language processing, and artificial intelligence. So that was my field of study for many years. So I was fortunate enough to see it when it's all started,
Mhm.
and the things that we were dreaming about during the PhD and kind of like hypothesizing that it will happen, we are using them. So it's a great time to be alive. You have to think about science and how it progresses. We started really seeing a lot of advancement, especially with mathematics and computation. That really helped us break the grounds because AI in the core of it is basically a computational model. So it needs to compute in order for it to use logic and inference to process the data and present it as if it understood it. In my view, AI has two main components: the AI algorithm itself, which is akin, in my view, to a child's brain. So you would basically, if a child is born in a certain place in the world, they derive their genes from their parents. Those genes are what creates the initial brain of that child. Think about it as nature and nurture. That's the difference between the algorithm and then the data on which the algorithm processed and learned from it. And all of that stuff generates the actual AI itself, which has a learned model. So it's born, has some maybe preconceptions, but then it grows and ingests more data and forms weights in the back end to understand how it would process those data.
Well, in November 2022, the world woke up one morning to discover ChatGPT. So if you were to provide an age guesstimate for AI today, how old is AI?
So right now, AI is about 5 years old. So it's a 5-year-old kid that is very curious, that can give you answers, and it's learning more. AI it usually is a classifier, meaning that it classifies inputs that comes its way to choose something else so that it can proceed. And the simplest, most form of that is a binary selection. So one parameter selects black or white, for example. So if you would train it on a bunch of black and white billiard pools, for example, it would basically draw a line between the current set of balls and says whatever falls on the right hand side is black, whatever falls on the left hand side would be white. Now think about having two parameters like the color and the size of the ball. So now you have a plane that goes between smaller and bigger ones. And in order to give a really good estimate of it, you have to give it more pieces of data. So the more parameters, the more data that you need to ingest and learn that AI. So AI models that are being used in ChatGPT and others have on around 70 billion parameters. So the amount of data that it needs to train such an AI is just enormous. So it would be very hard for any one implementation to basically acquire this data and then train the model on it for months and months and months. Hence the role of generative pre-training. So the GPT as a class of AI uses pre-existing data and an enormous amount of parameters to train on it so that the probability that the question that you would ask of it has been seen in this data is quite high. So that's the power of it. And generative, it generates new lines or new bits of information as it goes. Now, combining NLP, natural language processing layer on top of that, meaning it understands the words that you are typing into it, and then uses the model in the back end to crank the proverbial logic machine and analyzes what this might be referring to. And hence it would generate data based on what you are saying. If you've done a simple exercise like tell me something about Nashville, it will go and start to generate context about Nashville from what it has been learning in the back end. If you tell it, give me a story about Nashville, probably it will go to either Nashville roots as healthcare or Nashville roots as country music, and starts to give you more data than the question itself that you started with, hence the generative aspect of it.
Well, and that has led to many of us understanding the concept of hallucinations. So that's a phrase. It may not be the technologically correct phrase, but it's something that we common language people understand, making things up that aren't really factually supportive. How does that happen?
So it tries to provide an answer for you. And the deeper you go into the rabbit hole, the more it will stray out of the original set of data that it has ingested. And I'm loosely paraphrasing here, into a new territory that it starts to generate. And then it feeds that back into its own algorithm and continues from it. And there are very interesting things that come out from that experiment, not only hallucinations, meaning that it would come up with data that might not be true at all, because it basically saw a big emphasis on that somewhere. But also there will be what amounts to subconscious thoughts that start to surface to the root. And a famous experiment by MIT who trained the same AI algorithm on two separate sets of data. One that was generic and the other one was specific to murder cases. So when they would present a picture of a piece of cloth with a paint stain, the first one would say paint on a piece of cloth. The second one will say blood, murder. A picture of people sleeping in a park. The first one will say people laying down. The second one will say corpses, murder. So what I'm trying to get to is that the nurture of the AI affects the AI and what it produces. AAK, God made man in its image, and man made AI in its image. So we actually affect AI and how AI operates and ingests data by the data that we present. So if we could create the data in one direction or the other, based on our biases, those biases may manifest themselves into AI itself, which is fascinating to me.
But it is fascinating to me as well, and you explain it so well. And as you know, at Guardrail Technologies, we are focused on what we're calling responsible AI. And we've seen time and time again, whether they're politicians or engineers or even the creators of artificial intelligence, call for guardrails. So to your perspective, are those concerns real? Do we need to be attentive to what we're calling responsible AI?
Right, absolutely, 100%. So, for example, take the current unfortunate events in the Middle East. There were images that came out, and people immediately went like wildfire on social media, only to be discovered later on that they were fakes and they were AI generated. And I think it was one of the big broadcasts that apologized for actually putting it on the air. So that's how good the images were, how much that it affected people that are even experts in the field. So it's kind of like getting to the point where I need to see you and touch you in order to understand that you are who you are, unless we have some guardrails that will allow us to guard against such bad actors and figure out how to work through it. So in my mind, this is a quintessential piece of how we need to actually guard against the bad uses of AI.
All we can do is wish you the very best, and let's stay in touch so that we can continue to make the world a better place.
Be safe out there.